So, do you guys think that horror games have just depleted in quality over time? Like, is this something that you ever just think about? I mean, I've been, I've been kind of in looking at horror games as of recently. I know back then though, I was kind of a bit more into them, especially when games like Five Nights at Freddy's and stuff came out. That's when I was like really, really into it. Because that was like the only game, that was like the first game that really got me into like the horror aspect of stuff. Just because of the way it did it was so unique at the time. And it was so unsettling. Something that's like, obviously, yeah, it kind of, there's like that aesthetic of like, oh, something that's not supposed to be look creepy that is. I know that works a lot. People make a lot of like doll movies and stuff. And yeah, that stuff works. But I'm talking about more so of like, no, nobody really did the whole Chuck E. Cheese thing. So I guess that's what made it really popular. But I'm not really sure if horror games have just been better or have been worse. I know a lot of like indie games have been really good. I know a lot of indie games have been pretty good. But indie games are usually really good. I'm not saying all. Some are just. I wouldn't say they're all. I wouldn't say they're even like terrible. It's just some have more effort and stuff put into them. Some people make them for jokes and stuff. But I'm not here to talk about indie games. I'm here to talk about horror games in general. But like back then when we had games like Five Nights at Freddy's and games like Hello Neighbor and stuff, Hello Neighbor's a whole different situation, so I'll get into it a little bit, but I just wonder if any of you guys really think that horror games have just gone down in quality completely, and if they just weren't the thing that they once were, or because I know back in like 2013, horror games were just like a really popular thing, or not a lot of people were playing horror games, so once you started getting a lot of good ones, they started popping off. So I don't know if like back then it was just, oh yeah, well we didn't have a lot of horror games, so anyone that we get is pretty good, or if it's like, well, it's not that, it's just that the ones we have now are just the ones we have now are like still like super good. Or at least we just have a lot more of them now, so it's harder to criticize. Or it's harder to criticize back then. I'm sorry, I didn't know where I was going there. It's harder to criticize back then, since, there just wasn't a lot of horror games. But now, since we do have a lot of horror games, we can... It's kind of easier to detect when one is, like, just not good. So, with that being said, I really wonder if they've gone down. I think like with the platform horror games that we have now, obviously there's like room for error and stuff, and there's a certain standard that must be upheld, and there's like many different types of scary games. One that are supposed to scare you in one way, and one that's supposed to leave you not wanting to go to sleep at night without your nighty light. But no, they're all horror games in a way, and they all serve a different purpose. But I know a lot of games like Hello Neighbor, that was I don't think the game was not scary. Okay, I'll tell you right now, when the first one came out, everyone was pretty scary. It was pretty scary. It was like a very startly type of scary, because you're in somebody's house, you're breaking and entering somebody's house, and they're looking for you in a way. Not like, well, yeah, let's just keep it like that. They're looking for you. So I think that was pretty cool. Especially since at the time, FNAF wasn't really like a free roam game until we got Security Breach. So a lot of people were wanting that aspect of FNAF to have like a free roam version of Five Nights at Freddy's, because that would have been really scary. So Hello Neighbor was kind of there, to give us that free roam, hey, we're in somebody's house and we're not safe type of feel, So I think that was cool. I think that's cool. But the whole thing with it was just the lore thing, and then people weren't excited about it. It lost. I don't know the full ins and outs of it. I just know that it flopped horribly, very horribly, terribly. But I mean, like, think of games that we got now, like Poppy Playtime and Mandela Catalog and Backrooms, you know, just many different types of horror. And I'll say for one. Mandela, the analog horror stuff is like really cool. It could be done poorly. I mean, I'm not the analog analyst or anything, but you know, there have been some times where I've seen some analog horror, or some VHS horror videos, and they just don't really strike me the same way. But at the same time, a lot of them do, because just the type of spook that it gives you, you know, especially when you watch them at night. Super scary stuff. But you know, besides that, I don't know if people would consider that a drop in quality of horror games, or a rise in quality of horror games, or if it's just like we don't really know because there's just so many horror games out now. So now we're looking, you know, we kind of didn't really have a standard back then. Because if you look at a lot of the scary games back then now, it's like, no, it's not scary. Like Five Nights at Freddy's, it was scary when it came out, but it's the jump scare type of scary, you know. The lore stuff is, you know, if you look into that, that's when it becomes really creepy. But like the first game, it doesn't scare you the way it did. It may scare you in like in a nostalgic sense of like you remember how scary it was, and it still shows some of those elements today. I think like the ambiance of it and stuff, and I think that stuff is still scary. Playing in the right setting, it might give you those little creeps back. But I mean, just playing it now, it's like it's not scary. Games like Amnesia too, like those just aren't scary whatsoever. And I at one point I thought that was like a super scary game. A super scary game. It's like the monster and stuff that was in there. I thought that stuff was mad scary, dog. But like now, like I rewatched it, or I looked at it again, and it's like, oh wow, that was scary. So I was like, oh, that was terrible. not the dog on the Amnesia developer or anything. At the time, you made a very scary game that everybody was crap with their pants over. But like just looking at it now, I was just like, oh, well, dang, I didn't realize it was like that, you know. But like that's just the thing though, because it was like, since there wasn't a lot of horror games, was there really a standard? I'm not sure. I think now there's a standard to uphold, and which people want to have the crap scared out of them. And you know, they can feel that they have the right to feel that way. But I know games like not games like videos like the Backrooms and stuff really trigger that horror sense. Of just something being unreal. But I think the big sense of horror is like what scares people a lot with horror games is the sense of not feeling in control and not knowing what's happening. Or since you don't know what's happening, you feel you're not in control. So since you're not in control, you don't know what to expect. And since you don't know what to expect, anything can happen, so it makes you assume the worst situation possible. So that being said, you know, that's what gets you scared, triggers your fight or flight. And that's what really helps make a horror game scary. So like a lot of the analog horror stuff, that it really shines a huge light on that, and that's what's really scary about it. But I mean, I guess the question is like, what's the standard of horror games? Like, what standards need to be upheld? Do you just need to be scared? Do you just need to be really scared? I mean, Choo Choo Charles did it really good, but I mean, I wouldn't call it like a ooh creepy, I can't sleep at night type of scary. Just like a who thinks of that type of scary, you know? Like you take something wholesome and then you turn it into scary and something scary, like think of like a tennis ball. A tennis ball that's like it's like an alien alternate of some sort. For some reason, it just like shows up and doesn't show up in your house every now and then, or in the same place that you put it. You know, like kind of just something, you know, where it's like it's not supposed to do that, but it does. But I guess I don't know. I guess if the standard could be that you just need to be scared. But there are just different types of scary games, and I feel like the normal person who doesn't really look too much into horror if it doesn't scare them anymore, they're gonna be like, oh, I don't see how anybody thought that was scary. Or if it doesn't like leave them with a weird feeling of, you know, is this gonna happen to me? You know, then I don't. They're probably not gonna like it. You know, and it's like there's different things to consider in a horror game. So that being said, you know, I just don't know if there's really a standard, and if there is a standard, I just don't know what it is, you know? It's like, I can play, like, Poppy Playtime, and sure, it can scare me in a way, and, like, yeah, sure, story-wise, everything needs to be down-packed, and lore-wise, obviously, if the game has that, you want that to be absolutely fire. That for sure could affect, you know, the general performance of the scary game, but what I'm talking about is just how it scares you and what it uses to scare you. Like, what's the standard there, if there is any? Because, I mean, different things scare different people. Heck, I'm pretty sure there are people who find SpongeBob scary in some ways. But, you know, yeah, it just all depends on the person. So I guess that's just weird. At least, you know, because, I don't know. I don't know the standard for it, so if there is a standard to be upheld, I'm just not sure what that is, because there's a lot of people that you want to please, but you can't please everyone, but you kind of can please a lot of people, because that's been shown, but you've only been able to please a lot of people because it's just something that hasn't really been done a lot. So that being said, you know, I just don't really know. If somebody were to drop something like Five Nights at Freddy's today, if Five Nights at Freddy's didn't exist back then, well, I feel like the whole horror game, you know, realm just wouldn't be the same without Five Nights at Freddy's, but, you know, if somebody dropped something similar, would it have that same effect? I'm sure there'll be people who call it a Five Nights at Freddy's knockoff and stuff. There are always those when it comes to other games, but, I just wonder, like, if somebody were to drop something similar, at least, but just completely, like, not the same, but just different in a way, or like the same thing, you're just in a different way. I don't know. Maybe. But all I'm thinking is just like, if there is a standard, I feel like if there should be a standard, the standard should be, does it tell a great story, if it has one to tell, and does it scare you in the way it wants to scare you? And I think if a game does that, then honestly, really, I think it does well as a horror game. I think it did what it's supposed to do.